Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Parker from The Conscious Self and welcome to episode 5 of The Conscious Cast. And today we're going to be talking about spirituality, what it means to be spiritual, what it means to live in the modern contemporary society as a spiritual person, and how you can integrate spiritual values and lessons and philosophy into your everyday life. Now I want to start this episode with an understanding of spirituality and what it is and what it isn't. So spirituality is connecting to what you are at core. To me, it's something that we must fulfill within ourselves to live a healthy and happy life. Now, we may fulfill our mental health, we may fulfill our physical health, but there's a spiritual aspect to who we are, which is so integral to our fulfillment, so integral to living contented and peaceful. And, you know, there's lots of spiritual practices out there, i.e. meditation, breathwork, stuff I teach, which allow you to connect to what you are at core, allow you to connect to nature, allow you to connect to the breath, allow you to connect to presence, where you are. Now, spirituality is at the moment in this contemporary society, you know, it's going through a new wave of performativeness, if you ask me. There's a whole lot of white linen people out there who are, there's a vibe to it. There's a lingo, there's a language, there's a look to it. There's a spiritual scene out there, which is fantastic. You know, I love that there's a spiritual scene out there. I'm not, you know, picking on anyone directly. But there's also a lot of spiritual people out there who are doing it for Instagram, they're doing it for TikTok, they're doing it for likes and they're doing it for feedback. Whereas being spiritual to me is being your most authentic self and connecting to source through meditation and breathwork, connecting to peace and contentedness, and also to learn the valuable lessons that life gives us so that we can level up on our spiritual journey. You can't be any more spiritual than anyone else. You can only be on your journey and they're on their journey. And there is no start, there is no finish line, there is no middle bit. There's just a journey that we're all on, a path that we're all on, many different paths all lead to the same place. So it's understanding that, you know, and in this performative spiritual world, there is the idea that maybe you're more spiritual than someone else, or I'm more spiritual than someone else. No, I don't believe that. I believe that maybe I've learnt more lessons sometimes. I believe that maybe you've learnt more lessons than me, or maybe you haven't, who knows, or maybe I haven't. And what that is just an understanding that, you know, I'm going through a journey. And the thing with learning those lessons is, those spiritual lessons or life lessons, is they're gifts. And you must pass them down as soon as you're gifted them. They're there to be passed on to everyone else. And that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is this beautiful thing that we get gifted from painful experiences for the most part. And through that wisdom, we don't relive the same experiences. So if you haven't learnt the wisdom, you will repeat the cycle. And that's where that old adage comes from, the Ubosus, I'm not sure, maybe I'm not pronouncing that right. But the abortus serpent, where he's eating his tail, you know, you'll suffer in the loop until you learn the lesson. And once you've learned those lessons, you have an obligation to pass them down to someone else when they're ready for the lesson. There is a little caveat to that. So until they're ready for the lesson, they're not willing to hear it from you. And it can come across as preachy. So the idea is to pass them the lesson, gift it to them, and if they're ready, they'll accept it. If they're not, you know, that's okay. And but never think that you're better than them in that process, you know, just give them the gift and then move forward. So I would be lying if I said that a spiritual life is an easy life, you know, or you think that, okay, now I'm spiritual, I'm connected. And it's very, when you're learning about this stuff, when you're learning the lessons, reading the information, trying to understand yourself better, at the start it's very beautiful, very transformative. And then comes the dark night of the soul, comes the harsh part where you're learning parts of yourself that maybe you've neglected, learning about parts of yourself that maybe aren't as positive as you like. Learn about parts of yourself that really that you must work on. And they call it the dark night of the soul. They call it shadow work, working on parts of ourselves that aren't conducive of a contented life. You know, for example, on my journey, I was addicted to drugs. On my journey, I had some trust issues. And instead of blaming everyone else, I had to look at myself with an introspective eye and understand that it's me who needs to change. And until I accept that, until I become truly accountable, I will not become authentic. So for me and the conscious self, the lesson to learn is through accountability, comes authentic change. Accountability becomes authenticity. And that's something I teach in my coaching, is that, like, let's really be accountable. What are we doing? What are we saying? What are the habits that don't serve us? Where can we learn, change and grow just by looking at ourselves? I give them the mirror. I hold you up a mirror. I don't own the mirror's there, the mirror's always there. And you get to look in that mirror and we go, okay, let's work on these things. They'll lead to a better understanding of self, number one, but also they'll lead to positive and authentic change. And authenticity, as we know, is our highest vibration. When we can be truly authentic, we know ourselves integrally, and we are authentic, and we are just the best version of ourselves. Authenticity is the best version of yourself, right? You can vibrate at that beautiful vibration. They've done studies on this where they now understand that, yes, we talk about love and attracting abundance into our lives, manifesting, but really authenticity manifests what you want in your life. It's worth pointing out that people who are authentic attract what they want, even if they're not great people. That's why people you see who aren't great people, who treat people like shit, they still get what they want sometimes because they're just being authentic. That's who they are. It's a real shame that they're that way, but it makes sense, right? And that's why sometimes you see people who aren't great people living the life that they want to live, living the life of their dreams. So, that's not a spiritual life, though. I'm not trying to say that spirituality is, you have to be fluffy and lovely all the time. That's not true either. You can get stuff wrong and right those wrongs and make mistakes. My spiritual journey is one of harsh truths that led to beautiful lessons and blessings. And that's how I became my most authentic self. And I believe the authenticity changes over time as well. You're always learning about the new version of yourself, and sometimes you're making peace with the past version of yourself that didn't suffice at the time, or that was in survival mode, that was there for a reason. And, maybe you didn't like that version of yourself, maybe you had to do what you had to do, but still you overcame that, and they were there for what you needed it for. They were there to help you overcome that moment. So it's making peace with yourself too. There's so many beautiful aspects of spirituality, and they lead into philosophy too, spiritual philosophy. And that's why I feel like philosophy and spirituality meet, because the lessons, they kind of come together. It's same as theology too, spiritual theology lessons, the spiritual and philosophical and theological lessons, they're kind of all the same. They all lead to the same place. I've said this before, but many different roads all lead to the same place. So why bother being spiritual? Why bother trying to work on your spiritual self, work on yourself, have an introspective eye and be conscious? Because unconscious acts lead to unconscious places, conscious acts lead to conscious places, which then lead to more success, more joy, more contentedness in your life. Unconscious behaviours often lead us to places that we don't want to be in. They lead us to parts of ourselves that we just repeat over and over and over again. It's that unconscious habit that you keep going back to, i.e. picking up the phone first thing in the morning, starting your day wrong, and it's that pull, that real pull to do it, where the body is just pulling you towards something rather than you being in control of the mind. It's worth noting here that in Hermetic philosophy and in Stoic philosophy, they always talk about not being pulled by the body's will. The body will distract you, the pleasures will distract you. And it's that pain which will actually, the small parts of pain, the little delayed gratification, that will really lead you to better versions of yourself. So we're talking of pleasures, I mean, like, the phone is a great example. Looking at your phone all the time, scrolling on social media, yes, it feels pleasurable at the time, but really it does no benefit to you at all. And then there's also drinking every weekend. You might be in the habit of drinking every weekend and feel like you're missing out, the fear of missing out, we've all had that. And you're going out every weekend just for the sake of going out. It leads to not having as much money, it leads to being rough all weekend, it leads to having a bad week, and then by the time you've sorted yourself out on Thursday, you're back out again on Friday. So it's that unconscious behaviour that we want to stop, being conscious of our behaviours. And there's that little moment before acting that you can act on, and it's just stopping yourself from doing that. And that's a conscious behaviour. That switches from unconscious to conscious. So it's within the philosophies, they are saying spiritual truths too. So the pleasures of the body, it's anger, it's lust, it's greed. They will all distract you from your real truth. If you can work on those, that's 80% of the way, right? Then you have to work on your contentedness, your connection, your stillness, your peace, your controlling of the mind rather than letting the mind be a master, and just being where you are, being present. So meditation is a great way of cultivating that response rather than reactivity. Meditation gives you that pause before you act. We're honouring the pause in meditation, but that filters down into your life. And that's why serious seekers must meditate. And that's a conviction of mine. You must meditate if you want to be spiritual. If you want to be connected spiritually and understand yourself better, you must meditate. Meditation is the inward eye, but also the keys to the universe. In some philosophies, in yogic philosophy, it's that that inward eye, that silence is the connection to the cosmos. It's connection to everything that's ever been, the Brahman, the Godhead, whatever it may be. Meditation is the connection to source. Now, I know everyone finds meditation really hard. Sitting down for the first 10 minutes is the hardest part, and everyone's like, well, I only do 10 minutes. But really, if you can sit for longer, then please do. Think about how your mind works. Your mind is this beautiful tool which helps you figure things out, problem solve, arranges your life for you. But if it is out of control, and if it is just thinking all the time, we're addicted to thinking, right? And it's just thinking all the time. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense. It's nonsense. Then, meditation allows you to file your thoughts. That's the way I put it. Think of your mind like an office. It's really, really droll, isn't it? But you've got these filer faxes in your office, and your thoughts are bits of paper that you've got scattered all over the room. And what you're doing by meditating, especially in the first 10 minutes, is just putting them in the right places. You're filing them, you're putting them, you're numbering them, you're alphabetically ordering them, whatever it may be, you're filing them in those places. And then, once it's filed, then you can enjoy the stillness and peace. Yes, the thoughts will come up. You're only human. The thoughts will come back up, and you'll be distracted by them. But we come back to the breath, come back to ourselves, whatever it may be, whatever you're using to focus, whether it be a visualization or a breath. Then we come back to ourselves, and that's when you get those beautiful moments of clarity and stillness that also filter into your life. Now, I'm a big believer that meditation and breath work is not just for the moment you're meditating and breathing. It's for every other day, it's for every day in your life. It's cultivating that pause, honouring that pause, and that's so integral to a spiritual life, but also to benefit your life. And I believe, and I think other philosophies believe, that nature is one of the best ways to connect to yourself spiritually, because that's what you are at core. You are from nature. You are nature's consciousness manifest. And meditating in nature, being in nature, connecting to nature will really connect you to the deepest truths within yourself, because nature is this beautiful teacher, the harsh mistress of our world. Nature is life-bringing, gift-giving, but also can take it away and, can be dangerous at times. Yet within that is some beautiful, powerful truths that that's how life should be. And now we no longer need to survive in nature. We're very comfortable nowadays. We've got our home, we've got heating, we've got food, we've got comfort at our fingertips. But to go back to nature is to go back to real truth, because that's what you are at core. It takes away this comfortableness that we have, this familiarity with just sitting and just being able to scroll and eat whatever you want at any time. So I believe it's important for us to go back to nature, whether that be through camping, whether that just be going for a walk, whatever it may be, however you connect to nature, that leads you to deeper truths within yourself. And you may think to yourself, when I go to nature, I just go for a walk. And that's absolutely fine. That might be your spiritual practice, going for that daily walk in any weather, I think that's important too, is getting out in the rain too, getting out in the fog, the mist, in the harsher weathers, because that's another spiritual truth is not every day is a good day. Not every day is a spiritual connected day. Some days is a slog. Some days are harsh and challenging, and that's the same as the weather. Deep truth within nature, something that we should all access it all the time. We are part of nature. There is no part of nature that you are not connected to. You've got this intricate web of connection in nature. For example, the breath. On the last episode, we talked about the breath and how you're connected to everything that breathes. Everyone else that breathes as well. Everyone breathes. Everyone takes a breath, right? We share this breath with everything else, with everyone else. It connects us to the planet, it connects us to the ground, it connects us to the trees, it connects us to the air, it connects us to the birds, the bees, the trees, the seeds, whatever it may be. The breath is the cosmic connection that we have with nature. Every time you take a breath, you can feel that connection. That's a spiritual act. Breathing is a spiritual act. And that's why we use the breath as a portal into vastness, into stillness, into spaciousness, and into that contented feeling we get when we sit and breathe and meditate. Now, it's worth noting here that I truly believe that you have to use your body to be connected to your spiritual self. You can't be abusing your body and be connected spiritually at the same time. Think of eating crap food and drinking as a dampener on your spiritual connection. Think of this body like an antenna. This body is an antenna, and when it's out of sorts, an antenna doesn't work when it's out of sorts, when it's not facing the right direction, you're not picking up a signal. And that's how I feel, the body is our connection. The 3D has a connection to the 5D, it's part of it. So this body must be in good cohorts to connect to your spiritual self. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big teacher in that. If you're not fulfilling yourself physically, you're going to be unhappy. You're not going to feel fulfilled. You're going to feel miserable, because the body is connected to the mind's connected to the body. There is no dissonance between the connection of these two. And that means also there's no dissonance between the connection between the spiritual self as well. The body must be looked after, whether that be through diet, through exercise, through yoga, through training. However you look after your body, think of this thing like an antenna. It houses your spiritual self. This is your consciousness's vehicle. You wouldn't plug into the mains with a dodgy wire with copper exposed, and there being water on the floor, and the grid being offline, or there being no power for the solar panels, whatever it may be, and expect to receive electricity. You have to look after the wire, you have to look after the connection, you have to look after the plug, whatever it may be. It might need a new fuse, but it's so important to look after this housing, this consciousness vehicle. I think one thing I always come back to is there's this thing in the spiritual community where we might go and drink ayahuasca, do some medicine, mushrooms, and the medicine community, there's these phrases that I keep hearing in the medicine community, and it's like, oh, the healing's never done, man. The healing's never done. And I believe that in some way. I do believe that the healing never ends. There's always parts of yourself you can work on, of course, but some things must end. Some things must end. Some truths must be lived and acted on, and put some things to bed. They must end. Some truths must lead to better truths, to better knowledge of self that lead to revelations and becoming more. Otherwise, what's the point? And this is why we shouldn't always go back to the medicine every time we feel like we need fixing. It should be used as a tool, to enhance ourselves every now and again and integrate it properly. There's a meme that I see going around and I love it. It's this guy walking out of a cave, and he's been on a search for himself. I think that's how it's meant to be perceived. And there's this dark part of himself holding on to him. And the quote above it is, "Integrate me, please, bro." And he's saying, "I just need more medicine. I just need to know more." But the integration is so important. And that's the same with everything else that leads you to yourself. The integration is so important. What is the point in witnessing the lessons if you're not going to act on them and become more as a result? Now, another place where you need to integrate and need to learn about yourself is relationships. And I believe that relationships are probably the best way to work on yourself, because our relationships are a mirror. And they reflect back to us what we don't like about ourselves. They reflect back to us what we don't want to see in other people and who we don't want to be around. And especially your romantic relationship. Now, if you're going through a turbulent or challenging relationship, especially a romantic relationship, then maybe it's time to use this as a tool to become the best version of yourself, or to enhance yourself, to grow, to connect to yourself more. We're always pointing the finger of blame to them to say, like, you need to change for us to live a better life. Now, that never works. When you point at someone, you're almost giving your power through your finger. You're pointing at them and you're saying, go away and do something with this and change, and then we'll be better as a result. But they won't do anything with that. Blame makes people feel defensive, and it's a personal attack, and they seldom do people act on that. The only change that you can really enact, you can really make happen, is the change within yourself. And if they don't change after you've changed, then maybe you've outgrown them, and that's okay. But, that's so integral. That accountability will lead to better places. Accountability for me is 101 when it comes to really being the best version of yourself. Accountability leads to authenticity. Accountability leads to acceptance. Accountability leads to authentic change. So yeah, your relationships are a real great place, a great teacher of where to work, where to find more out about yourself. And if you're not getting much depth from your partner, the conversations, you're always butting heads or arguing, that's okay. But once you use that to change, then they will or they won't level up. They will see that you've made an effort to become a better version of yourself. And if they don't level up, then maybe it is time to move apart, no matter what the situation is. And I think, it's a harsh but powerful spiritual truth. So let's talk about ego. Now, this is a big one. Everyone talks about ego like they don't have one, which I think is hilarious. Everyone's got an ego. Ego actually keeps you here. Ego is the thing which helps you survive. Ego keeps you safe in times of trouble. Ego is a necessary component of self. And you can't negate any aspect of yourself. Ego's there, whether you like it or not. And if you believe you've lost your ego, that's ego. It's that spiritual hierarchy stuff where you think you're better than other people, and it's like, everyone's got an ego, whatever it may be. And often people who think they've lost their ego are extremely pretentious. They're extremely full of themselves, and they think they're better than other people. Like, I know something you don't, and I've got the wisdom and you don't. Now, everyone's got the wisdom. Life is the universal teacher, and again, it's just, we get gifted it, and you have to pass it down. It's so important. So yeah, check your ego regularly. See, I use Thai boxing as an ego check. I use Muay Thai as an ego check. We go and spar, and it's a spiritual act, sparring for me. It's meditative, number one. So I'm literally there. I'm present in that moment because it's all I'm thinking about. It's all I'm doing is sparring. I couldn't be anywhere else. It's a dangerous game of chess for me. So I'm really in the moment. Really present when I'm sparring. But also as well is that humility that comes from martial arts, that humility of knowing that you're not the best in the room, of knowing that you can be beaten at any point, of getting scored on, that humility that comes from martial arts. It's a spiritual act, especially for a man. I'm not saying it's not for a woman, but especially for a man. Our egos can go the way where we think we're extremely powerful and strong, almost bordering on narcissistic. Martial arts will teach you that you are not the shit. But it'll also build you up at the same time. It creates respect, camaraderie, control, discipline. It's a beautiful process, and all of those aspects man needs, man, woman, whatever it may be. But especially for me as a man, I need those things regularly. It keeps me on the right path. And I love that. There's a quote by, I think it's Socrates, and he talks about a man must be. No, sorry, I've got that wrong. It's not Socrates. I can't think who it is. But the quote is, a man must be a warrior and a scholar. Otherwise he'll have his thinking done by fools and his wars fought by cowards. I'm definitely paraphrasing there, and I've probably got that really wrong. But the lesson is still there, and I think that's so important. I think teach your young men to have discipline, control. Take them down to a Thai boxing gym where they've got a good ethos. Find a great coach who instills good values and morals and principles within them. I was always taught that we go down and train and we learn how to be a great fighter, compete, but it's all respect and honour, and you never ever use your skill as a martial artist outside of the gym, unless you really have to. Now, I believe in being a protector. I'll do what I have to do to protect my family and friends and loved ones, and if I have to do what I have to do, I have to do it. But it'll be last resort. The mouth and the words and the things you say are by far more powerful than your physical actions. In that respect, in respect of violence. Violence rarely solves anything unless you have to defend yourself from an attacker. But in the other aspect, in the other way of thinking of action and speech, is someone's actions will teach you who they are rather than who they say they are. You are what you do, not what you say you do. So I would love to hear from you and what your spiritual truths are, what you know to be absolute spiritual facts, and how you've learned and grown because of spirituality. What are the things that you love about it? What are the things that you find challenging about it? What are the practices that you use which really help you connect to source? And if there's anything that you've loved in this, please comment below. Please share, like and subscribe to the page because I want to create more content and you help me do that by doing that. And if you want to learn more, we do events, retreats, do one-to-one sessions, and you can learn more on our website at www.theconsciousself.co.uk. And also you can follow us on our socials at conscious__man and The Conscious Self on Facebook too. I've been Unpack from The Conscious Self. This has been episode 5 of The Conscious Cast, and hopefully I'll see you all soon on the next episode, and I really appreciate you guys watching. Big love.